To be keeping you company for the next few hours.
You are not going to believe the company.
This company.
You're going to bankrupt your mama's company?
At least I have the radio to keep me company.
On 93.5 and 107.5, The Fan.
What a glorious, and I mean glorious, Monday. It is perfect outside. Perfect. Eddie, I don't know if you know this or not, but it is like this in San Diego 362 days a year.
Are you talking about in terms of the picture and the no cloud in the sky and the sun being out? Okay.
Yes. I mean, we could maybe use 10 more degrees. Okay, fine. But otherwise, it is perfect. By the way, I sound really echoey. Is that me?
I think that's you a little bit, yeah.
Do I have a congestion? Which I shouldn't, because it's perfect outside, right?
I don't think you do.
I've got a reverb. Do you think it's because of lack of filler inside the cranium? Things are just bouncing all over the place in there?
There's always a chance, Jake.
There is that chance.
There's always a chance.
There is plenty to talk about. There is no open space when it comes to topics for this time of year when doing sports talk radio in the greatest city in all the land, Indianapolis, Indiana. Good afternoon to you. My name is Jake Query. That is the voice you just heard of Eddie Garrison. We call the program Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 colloquially. Can you say that word?
No, I'm not even trying.
Is it a word?
I would assume
colloquial? Is it colloquial or colloquial, right? So colloquially. I might have just made up a word. Either way, here's the reality. On the day that we have college basketball really ramping up, and yes, the Big Ten tournament does not get underway officially until tomorrow. And yes, the local interest of that begins on Wednesday when Indiana plays. And yes, Indiana might need to get a win over either Northwestern or Penn State. And I think that gets them in. But they are, at this point, scratching and crawling, trying to get into the NCAA tournament. But the good news is every other team that they are involved in that situation with seemingly has been declawed. And so the NCAA is literally holding a tournament and saying, does anybody want in, please? We've got to round this out. Let's go. Who wants in? And that's where it feels like things are. Purdue, of course, dropping now to the 7 seed in the Big Ten tournament. Whoever would have guessed that would be the case, but that's the reality after their home loss at Mackey Arena to finish the season. And that puts them in not a precarious position, but certainly there are a lot of question marks about the Boilers. We'll get into that as well. But let's begin with the big news that is largely alleged, but I think there's a lot to take from it. Over the weekend, the Colts did make some news. Zaire Franklin is on his way to Green Bay. And they got themselves a little bit of insurance, I think you'd say, in the form of a 25-year-old defensive tackle. Eddie, reality is this. They shored up depth at protecting against the run, correct?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah. He's primarily known as a run stopper. He had 50 tackles last year, which was a season high, and still only 25, former fourth-round pick. He's not the greatest in terms of pass rush. I think he was one of the worst last year in that respective category in terms of interior defensive linemen. But Jake, on the quarterback front with Stephen Holder reporting that this was about 12 minutes ago, as we approach and are now past the legal tampering window period opening in the NFL, he says that there will be a deal with Daniel Jones. They weren't close last week when they tagged him, but they are closer now. He said in regards to Alec Pierce, he continues to be in demand. He said that return is 50-50 in my opinion.
Okay, so let's begin with it. Let's go back to the Zaire Franklin trade. What they have is Colby Wooden, who is a 25-year-old. This is interesting when you look at, I think, one of the better and more underrated players for the Colts over his tenure has been, if you really look at it, and You look over their ability to, protect the run. One of the areas, Eddie, would you agree with me on this, that we have always talked about with the Colts that they have looked for is
we have an answer on one of the two free agents, Jake. Breaking news from Adam Schefter. Alec Pierce and the Indianapolis Colts have agreed to a contract 4 years, $116 million.
that's actually I guess that's about where we thought he'd be, 29 mil, right? And then now you get into the situation with Daniel Jones, which I'll get to in a second, and we'll get more on this Daniel Jones situation. We'll break that down as well. I'm a little surprised by that because I would have thought that now that leads me to believe, okay, that they must know that they are very close when it comes to Daniel Jones, because I do not think that Alec Pierce would have agreed to that if there was still great question mark at the quarterback position, because that's one of the things that he was very open about. He made no bones about the fact that, look, I want to make sure that we have a quarterback in place. But you wonder about Grover Stewart in terms of when his deal is up. Did the Colts, that's the point I wanted to put a tie on there. Did the Colts put themselves in position now to simply get, depth help on the defensive line helps. It is not necessarily pass rush. But Grover Stewart, as his contract, I believe, is coming up at the end of this coming season, is this an insurance policy? Now, as for Alec Pierce.
Some other terms on that deal, Jake. This is from Ian Rappaport of NFL Network. The deal came together overnight, contains $84 million in guarantees, $60 million fully guaranteed at signing. The deal is worth up to $116 million.
I'm a little surprised, again, that and maybe, when you're in the tampering window, that he did not wait to see, but perhaps what's the most that somebody else would have offered him? Probably 30 to 31?
Yeah, the belief is that he would have gone for 30, if not a little bit more, if he went to the open market. He really wanted to be back in Indianapolis, it appears, which bodes well, Jake, if you are a Daniel Jones believer, because Alec Pierce said that he wanted to come back to Indianapolis if Daniel Jones was here. He wanted to go somewhere where that he felt the quarterback position was going to have some stability. And you would have to imagine that the only reason why Alec Pierce signs his contract is because he knows that there's an extension, or I guess it should say a contract coming with Daniel Jones.
There is an ex-post Twitter account. I have no idea who this is. It's one of these random accounts with 2,000 followers, right? Out of Chicago. This morning sent a post. Per my sources, Alec Pierce is staying in Indianapolis on a long-term deal. And, of course, everybody's like, who are you? But here we are. Now, this, one would assume, means that Daniel Jones is in the mix. And probably we will hear sooner rather than later that Daniel Jones is back. You wonder what this means contractually for Michael Pittman and whether or not there's going to need to be a restructure. But the thing that I thought about going into today, and it still holds true even if Alec Pierce is back in the mix, and even if that means the Colts are about to sign Daniel Jones somewhere around the quote, Sam Darnold money. And one of the things that has, if you were to fall in line with the Chris Ballard camp narrative, one of the things that we have said for years regarding Chris Ballard, if you were one that defends Chris Ballard, might actually in this case have helped him more than any other. And what it was that has bitten him in the past, I'm saying, if you're a defender. If you are a defender of Chris Ballard, or if you're Chris Ballard and you are having to state and spell out your case as to why you deserve a decade of leadership in the NFL with one playoff win. If you're Chris Ballard, you look at that and you say, well, let me explain. My tenure has been largely hampered, redirected, or handcuffed by injury. I had a quarterback in Andrew Luck that was generational, that I was going to build around, and his style of play, as much as anything else, factored into consistent injury that ultimately led to an untimely retire. And so then I had to go at the quarterback position and kind of piecemeal things together. And I went with a couple of different players, and, I tried out a couple of veterans that dealt with dinging, nagging injuries. I had one that I thought was going to be the future of my franchise that I signed, and he did miss a few games, but the owner wasn't necessarily keen on him, and I again had to go back to the drawing board. And eventually I drafted my franchise quarterback. But injuries held it back. So I went back to the drawing board again, and I got a veteran player who played really well for me. And truthfully, when it comes to the Chris Ballard development of teams in his tenure in Indianapolis, health has been the Achilles. Health at quarterback has been their weakness. They have not been able to get a consistently healthy quarterback. And when I saw the reports that Daniel Jones, and this is alleged, it's speculation, it's conjecture, but when considering the sources of who is saying it, I think pretty reliable, that while the Colts were willing to give him, quote, Sam Darnold money. Look, you've had a journeyman vagabond career, not necessarily journeyman, but you've gone to a couple of different places. You've had variations of success, variations of failure. But looking at what Sam Darnold did, we are willing to give you a deal that's going to pay you around $100 million. And allegedly, the Colts made that offer even after Daniel Jones had his season interrupted with a torn Achilles. And when he had his season interrupted and ended with the torn Achilles, everything changed. And yet, word is that during this process, initially, and I get it, you always shoot high. I get it. But initially, allegedly, Daniel Jones was asking for $50 million per year. Now, if that's the case, if that's an accurate report, and it's not totally far off to think it's accurate, because Daniel Jones is probably thinking to himself, okay, if they're going to franchise tag me out, I'm talking about before he got the transition tag. If they're going to franchise tag me, they're willing to pay me $47 a year. So I might as well go ahead and ask for $50 per year in a multi-year deal, because if they're willing to franchise tag me at $47, they might be willing to give me a guaranteed $45 in multiple years. But the injury in this case, the Achilles, might have actually saved Chris Ballard. Because what it did, if Daniel Jones realistically was asking for $50 million per year, if Daniel Jones had never gotten hurt, and I get it, woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? If ifs and buts were candy and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. But when looking at it, one thing we can know based on the precedent and whatever else, if Daniel Jones was healthy, and let's say the Colts had gone and won a playoff game, and we're on the right trajectory, and Alec Pierce says, I will come back to you, but only if Daniel Jones is my quarterback. Then when Daniel Jones says, I want $50 million a year, then I think Chris Ballard at that point probably signs him for $50 million per year. And if that happens, then you need absolute perfection out of the guy. You need to get Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes out of him, or else this town is going to turn immediately on it and say, what in the world did he do? And look how handcuffed we now are. Or Daniel Jones wanted $50 million. He's healthy. They'd won a playoff game. Everybody in town is like, Daniel Jones, oh my gosh, the Colts have to keep Daniel Jones. The Colts got to keep Daniel Jones, especially if we want to keep Alec Pierce. Give him whatever he wants. Give him whatever he wants. And Daniel Jones comes out and says, I want a 3-year, $160 million deal. And Ballard says, you know what? Okay, fine. Let's look at this. And he looks over it and says, no. I can't because of the other options that are out there. I cannot do it. But here's the thing. Because they'd won a playoff game, because Daniel Jones is getting ready to go into free agency, then some other team like a Cleveland or New York or somebody else comes along and says, we'll give you 4 years and $208 million. Out the door. And that would have forced the Colts to either A, franchise tag him for $47 million a year, or B, the wiser thing, which would have been let him walk, and then people are carrying pitchforks. So Chris Ballard would have been in, likely, a damned if he did, damned if he didn't situation with Daniel Jones if Daniel Jones was healthy. But the Achilles changed everything. It's just literally right now in this town, we have two franchises, both of which had their trajectories and their direction and their design completely changed by the same injury. And now, yes, it would appear as though they must be close with Jones because they got Pierce in the mix. And does that, in fact, did they have to get Pierce locked up? Eddie, we originally assumed and were told by Alec Pierce, look, if you bring Daniel Jones back, that's going to go a long way in whether or not I'm in the mix.
Yeah.
Now, did they get basically preemptive and proactive by going to Alec Pierce and saying, if you agree to this, we will get your quarterback done. You know he's here on a transitional tag this year anyway. We will get it done. We can guarantee you for at least the first year, Daniel Jones is your guy. And so did they actually use that as the motivation to get Jones done? Because I would now be stunned if we don't hear within. I would be stunned if by the time, for example, Indiana is tipping off at 6:30 in the Big Ten tournament in Chicago on Wednesday, taking on either Northwestern or Penn State. It would surprise me if we do not have news about Daniel Jones by then.
It would surprise me as well, Jake. And when I read that report this morning, as you were talking about it, Albert Breer of Sports Illustrated, I could only think of Rush Hour when I saw $50 million.
$50 million? And who you think you kidnapped, Chelsea Clinton?
Honestly, that's a ton of money, right?
Yeah, and on the Alec Pierce front, Jake, in terms of where he lines up now, in terms of contracts per year in the NFL, $28.5 million per year, 4 years, $114. That is 11th right now in the league. You have to assume that he will move down because the cap's going to continue to expand, and there are still going to be wide receivers that are going to be paid here soon. So I get that it may be a lot of money at the time.
Give me the report again on Pierce.
4 years, $114 million. $80 million guaranteed, 60 of that, or 84 guaranteed, $60 million at signing.
Hey, Jake, are you saying 3 years is a long-term deal? Yeah, at quarterback, I'm saying Bill, fair question. A 3-year deal means you are signing him to a contract and not just continuing to tag it every year, is what I'm getting at.
Well, especially in this town, Jake, in this regime with Ballard, 3 years is a long deal for a quarterback.
That's right. I would anticipate three. What did you say? I would say that Jones now gets what, 3-110?
Boy, I still don't know if I'm ready to go that far.
But if you're going to tag him, if you're at the transition tag, if you're willing to pay him 37,
yeah.
I mean, 110 is basically right in that number, right?
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
That's a starting price. It's probably around, 38? So if you do 38
if
for 3 years,
if he's healthy, it's 40 to 45, which is crazy, right?
114, 3 for 114, somewhere in that ballpark.
Now, I'm going to go back to, and this is obviously happening as we're speaking, right? I'm going to say this right now if you're just turning over your radio at 12:19 p.m., because you just heard this news on Alec Pierce. If Alec Pierce is re-signed with the Colts, that, to me, more than anything else, if there's one piece of news I take from it. The biggest takeaway to me about Alec Pierce re-signing with the Colts is that means that they have enough belief, or Jones has given enough belief to Alec Pierce that Pierce, yes, in fact, knows that Daniel Jones is coming back. I do not think that Alec Pierce agrees to that deal without quarterback certainty or some assuredness. Like, would you honestly, if you know that you're getting ready to go into what seemingly would make you the most coveted wide receiver free agent of the class, would you re-sign with your club if you didn't have certainty as to who the quarterback was going to be?
No, I would not.
That right there tells you that the worst case scenario that everyone was fearing. They're going to screw this up, aren't they? A guy said to me randomly the other day. They're going to screw this up. Everybody felt. They're going to lose both of them. Now the question becomes, are they going to screw it up by financially leveraging themselves too highly on something that we have yet to see whether or not it works for an entire season? Is Daniel Jones the guy long-term, and is Alec Pierce the one that helps him become that? That's the question now. Your thoughts on it, Eddie?
To me, it's going to be interesting, as we have already discussed, Jake, that the Colts have to be under, or as they put it in NFL terms, cap compliant by noon Wednesday. So it'll be interesting to see what moves come next, because they were already $100 and some odd $1,000 over the cap, and the Zaire Franklin trade cannot become official until noon Wednesday. So I would expect the same thing for the Alec Pierce contract. So they're going to have to make some moves before then to kind of alleviate to manipulate the numbers on the cap. And you would have to expect that you're looking at Grover Stewart, Michael Pittman Jr., Quentin Nelson, DeForest Buckner, those veteran types of players that have a bigger cap hit number to get either some sort of an extension or restructuring to open up some space so that they have the ability to sign Daniel Jones, Alec Pierce, and then whomever they want to target in free agency.
They did sign a kicker, right? Over the weekend?
Blake Groupie back.
Colts lined themselves up a kicker. He was good, though, once he was in the mix, right? 1 year, $1.14 million, something like that. So that area of it, they are in good shape. There is plenty to talk about over the course of today. We will get plenty of reaction from this. We will discuss it. Mike Chappell going to join us at 1 o'clock today. Fish going to join us in about 10 minutes. We'll preview the Big Ten men's basketball tournament. Eddie, what's going on with Purdue?
No idea.
I thought Trey Kaufman-Wren had a really interesting answer about some of the things with college basketball, and in particular in the Big Ten, and things that there have been question marks about whether Purdue goes about it the right way, wrong way. Just when you're worried about Purdue in terms of their on-court consistency or lack thereof in their performance, I thought Trey Kaufman-Wren gave an outstanding answer. Whether or not that equates into consistent wins, we'll see. Obviously consistent, yes, but I mean, I'm saying beyond this era or this group of players. But we'll play that for you coming up a little bit later in the program as well. We've gone this far without mentioning that the Pacers lost last night. Now tied, doing their best. Tied with Sacramento, 15 wins.
Win category, yes. Win percentage-wise.
No, I know. Sacramento's 15-50, and the Pacers are 15-49, but they're both sitting right there at 15. And the important thing is Eddie last night after he got home did his homework assignment and watched Something About Mary for the first time. Which was funnier, the Pacer game or Something About Mary?
Oh, my gosh. Something About Mary. I don't know if there's anything funny about the Pacers, Jake. That's more or less,
Who was your favorite character?
It's a good one.
I mean, you feel bad laughing at Warren the whole time, right? But, like...
I was honestly going to say Warren's one of my favorite characters.
Do you want to know my... You know, I read into things, right? like in the Colts situation, I look at this news that Alec Pierce has signed, and I read into it to say he knows Daniel Jones is coming back. Do you want to know my something about Mary read into it deep dive analysis? Why do you think in the end, and spoiler alert for those of you that had not taken advantage in your 30 years of doing so, of seeing the movie, why do you think at the end of something about Mary, Eddie, she ends up picking Ben Stiller? I can't remember even his name, but picking him.
What was your question? I'm sorry.
Why do you think at the end of something about Mary, she ends up picking Warren? Is it?
I was about to say she can't pick Warren. That's
not Warren.
her brother.
What's Ben Stiller's?
Ted?
Ted. Thank you. Sorry.
Because he's a nice guy.
There's something that happens in it that I think very few people noticed. There's something that happens that very few people noticed. 15 minutes from now, I'll tell you about it because Don Fischer is next. Indiana getting set, Big Ten tournament. Big news again today. We'll be going over it all day long. Alec Pierce back with the Colts. What's that mean for Daniel Jones? We will continue to analyze as well.
It's Monday. It's 12:30. It's Fish. The voice of the Hoosiers, Don Fischer, joining Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
I was born in a small town.
So Indiana Big Ten men's basketball tournament. Dave Revson, I think, going to join us tomorrow from the Big Ten Network, looks like. What we know is this. Indiana will face the winner of Northwestern and Penn State. That will be their opening game. It will take place at 6:30 Indianapolis time, roughly, on Wednesday. And joining us now on the Java House Cold Brew Coffee guest line, he is the voice of the Indiana Hoosiers, Don Fischer. And Don, I don't know. At this point, I don't know that was a must-win for Indiana in Columbus in order to punch their ticket to the NCAA tournament. That bubble still seems that there are several that just refuse to burst their way through it. But clearly, I think they could really solidify themselves with a win coming up here in the Big Ten men's tournament. But let's go back to Columbus. A common way in which I ask it to you, did that game tell you more about what Ohio State did or the things that Indiana just failed to execute?
Well, I'd say more than anything else, Indiana failed to execute, especially at the defensive end of the court. They gave up 90 points to Ohio State in that ball game, and that's just not acceptable in the sense of your defensive performance. And that's called executing the game plan, so to speak, from what the coaches are asking you to do, because the three-point shot went down pretty easily, it seemed like, for Ohio State, and they had several guys that knocked it down. Thornton, of course, becomes the all-time leading scorer for Ohio State with the three that he hits just before halftime, and then he proceeds in the second half to do basically the same thing in the second half with another 18-point performance. He had 25 for the ball game, becomes their all-time leading scorer over Dennis Hobson, who had that record for several years. And, we may never see anybody else break that record at Ohio State because we are in the world of the transfer portal. And how many guys are going to stick around, how many guys go to the NBA early, all those kinds of things play into if you're great enough to score over 2,000 points in your career, you're probably not going to be around for 4 years at a school. So it's the world we live in right now, Jake. And unfortunately, from Indiana's perspective, they did not play well enough defensively in that ball game, and that's what cost them.
Don, we've talked all year long about, and I guess this will show that, maybe I'm never happy, never pleased, but, Lamar Wilkerson to me truly has been a great player for them, and he's a very gifted offensive player, obviously, and we've been talking all year long about Indiana getting supporting help for him. They had pretty good offensive balance on Saturday in Columbus, yet it clearly wasn't enough, and maybe that takes away from Wilkerson a little bit. Is there a safety for Indiana's standpoint with Wilkerson of just saying, you know what, 15 shots is not enough for this guy? I know that we got to get balance, but he needs to be putting it up at a high volume and being a high-volume shooter because he's a streak guy. Is there a danger in that, or are we finding out that might be their best attack?
Well, I here's what I would say about that, Jake, and here's the other thing people have to recognize at this point in the year. There is a major league scouting report on every team in the Big Ten by the coaches in this league, and they are going to try to take away your best player if they can possibly do that, or if they think they can take everybody else away and let the best player score at will. You got that combination going for you. But the truth of the matter is the defenses have really gotten much stouter with Lamar. They put their best guards on him or even a small forward, that kind of thing, to try to keep him contained. And they certainly did that in the game on Saturday, and he still got in double figures scoring-wise, but he was nowhere near as effective as he has been at the three-point line. And that's one of the reasons, because what Ohio State did defensively on him. So I just think that this Indiana basketball team is limited in a number of ways. We obviously saw Nick Dorn come into his own for a short time here in the season, and then kind of he's cooled off a little bit. Tucker DeVries has had to do so many more things this year than probably he has ever had to do in his career. Because of the expectations of what or the reason he can do that many things is because he's a coach's kid, smart enough to do it, and therefore he's responsible for a lot more things than he ever has been in regard to scoring the basketball. So honestly, this team is limited, and that's the biggest issue. And the one thing I will say, Jake, and I'm telling our fan base this now, what in my opinion, what this coach, Darren DeVries, has done with this basketball team this year has been remarkable, because you've got mid-major players on this roster. They're 98% mid-major players who are playing on a basketball league that is one of the toughest in the country to deal with, game in and game out. And this ball club really has done, I think, a tremendous job in the sense of being able to win some games that most people would have never thought they had a chance to win.
Don,
and honestly,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, all I'm saying here is, this is a basketball team that still plays hard and they still play together. There's no selfishness on this ball club, but they are mid-major players playing at the highest level, and that becomes a problem, especially as the year wears on and they start to wear out a little bit.
Don, one of the things, and you and I talked about this last week, Don Fischer is my guest. He's the voice of Indiana basketball, of course, and Indiana football. He joins me now on the Java House Cold Brew Coffee guest line. You and I talked about Ryan Carr. I think most people now know Ryan Carr's story, that went to Indiana, manager, was working in the executive level for the Pacers for 20-plus years. And Ryan loved it. I mean, Ryan loved, and I know Ryan really well. Ryan loved everything, Don, about being a part of the Pacers and being in the trenches and building rosters and all of that. And when he left to go back and take over the job as executive director at Indiana, I assumed it was because of his love for Indiana University basketball, being an alum and being a manager under Bob Knight. And when I asked Ryan about it on a personal phone call, not on the air, but I said, so Ryan, may I assume that you're going in there as hired by Indiana Athletics, regardless of who the coach is, you have this job? And he said, oh, no. I was hired by Darren DeVries, Jake, because I truly believe in Darren DeVries. I've gotten to know him and the character that he has. But this guy, Jake, is a flat-out really good coach, and I want to be a part of that. And for Ryan to take a situation where he had everything he wanted for the NBA to go and take what would be seen, Don, as a risk in that schematic situation of it, that tells me everything I need to know right there about Darren DeVries, and the fact that this guy clearly has people that understand basketball far more than I, under the understanding that he knows how to coach a basketball team. You know what I mean? That told me that everything right there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Ryan is a great get for this program. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And you're right. Darren DeVries hired him. He was not necessarily hired by the athletic department. He's hired by the athletic department, as we all know. But the guy who wanted him was Darren. And I know that Ryan believes in what Darren DeVries can bring to the table as a head basketball coach at IU. And so that's one of the reasons right now why I'm a little disturbed with our fan base that continues to expect, things that shouldn't be expected at this juncture. And when you have to go out and get an entire new roster of players, and you have to do it through the transfer portal system, and you're looking for the best that you can find and still afford, so to speak, you're doing your best. And I think that's exactly what this program has done. I think the first year I knew it was going to be problematic in some ways. I thought they might win a few more games than they have. But again, I think I talked about the limitations that this team has in that regard. And so I just hope our fan base understands your expectations. They're so unrealistic in so many ways. And that's the way it's been for the last 35 years because Indiana basketball has not been what it was under Bob Knight. It's that simple. So, and even at the end of Knight's era, it was starting to wane a little bit, as you know. So we're looking at a program right now that the fan base, at least the older part of the fan base, believes this team is still a blue blood, and they're not playing blue blood basketball. Let's face it, and that's why Darren DeVries was hired, and that's why you give him time and still the support that this program needs. Because when they don't show up or they start booing a player or that kind of thing, you're just making a huge mistake.
Don, has the blessing of Indiana basketball, and by that I mean the wonderful memories and years that people of a certain age, I mean, my age and older, can still live off of, right? Has that blessing at times been a curse for those that are currently dressing as Indiana basketball?
No, there's no doubt. I mean, again, everybody has expectations. We all want the season to be successful. We all want the team to make the NCAA tournament. With the roster that was acquired this year, like I said before, these are mid-major players that never played in the Big Ten Conference or any Power Four conference before, and it takes its toll as the season goes down the wire, and that's what it's done with this team. I think it's one of the reasons this team didn't flourish here at the end of the season and have lost 5 of their last 6 ball games. And that's not a knock on the players. These kids came in and have given their all. And there's not one of them on this basketball team that has played quite a few minutes this year that I would not congratulate on having a heck of a season, because I think they've overachieved in many respects.
I wanted to ask you about, Don, in the Ohio State game, saw some production that I liked out of Reed Bailey, who probably needed to get that going a little bit, like in a push here towards the tournaments. But was that because of something they came up with to kind of get Reed Bailey going, or were they just taking advantage of an area that Ohio State was giving to them, and so you don't read a lot into the fact that he had a nice outing?
Well, here's what I would tell you. Through this year, between Sam Alexis and Reed Bailey, one game it would be Reed that was really playing well. The next game it would be Sam. And they went back and forth all year long until probably the last 10, 12 ball games of the season. And Sam kind of took over here toward the end. Reed, I think, is one of those bigs he's really a stretch 4. He's not a true 5. And even though he's done a nice job in there, you can see that he has been a little he's had players that take advantage of some of his weaknesses. But he's just a great young man and a kid that plays as hard as he possibly can. And he has not played his best basketball, although he played a really good ball game against Ohio State. And Sam Alexis played well against Ohio State. Both of them were in the ball game at one time together, which is a total rarity. I don't think it's ever happened this year at any other time that they had both in the game at the same time. So that had to do probably a little bit with what Ohio State was trying to do defensively.
Indiana will open up the Big Ten tournament against either Northwestern or Penn State. In your mind, Don, with the way Indiana's playing right now, or the areas of which they now see themselves in the way they played, do you think that one of those two would be a better matchup than the other, or is it pretty much a draw?
Well, if you're asking me who I think we can beat, and I would say it's not a lock, but it would be one that I might bet on. I'd rather play Penn State because Indiana's lost to Northwestern 6 straight times, including this year.
But it's not in Assembly Hall this time, right? That's the good news.
Well, trust me, it didn't matter if it was in Assembly Hall or in Welsh Ryan Arena up in Northwestern. Northwestern has had Indiana's number now for the last several years now. They've won 6 in a row over IU. And I still think that Indiana should have won that ball game against the Cats this season here late in the year, but they did not. And they got a chance to break that curse if they could win this first ball game, because I think it'll be Northwestern who they will end up playing.
It will be on Wednesday.
That good.
Wednesday in Chicago, 6:30 tip local time. And, of course, you'll hear it on our sister station, 93 WIBC. Don, a pleasure as always, man, and enjoy this flurry of a run. We'll see how many games it is for Indiana.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jake.
Appreciate it. Don Fischer joining us on the Java House Cold Brew Coffee Guest Line. Eddie, you said we have breaking news?
The Indianapolis Colts have made a trade. They are sending wide receiver Michael Pittman Jr. to the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Okay. In exchange for?
That part we don't know yet.
Okay. So that is not, again, now comes the salary match game. Because with Alec Pierce in, Michael Pittman Jr. out, Zaire Franklin out, although you get a player back, and you will for Pittman as well, one would assume. And we'll see what that is. Chap joins us to break down all of it, and I'll tell you that little tidbit about something about Mary next.
and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
So, Eddie, we're going to recap all the Colts news here, but at the end of something about Mary, the thing that I think, maybe I'm the only one that thinks this, but this is like when we decipher right now the moves the Colts are making, I'm always looking at like, I don't know, like around the corner stuff, right? At the end of the movie, when Ted is leaving, and he has basically said to Mary, like, go with Brett, that's your guy. He walks out and he says goodbye to Warren by lifting up Warren's headset and whispering in his ear, and Warren does not react. He simply says goodbye to him. And for Mary, that was her sign. Warren had finally accepted and felt comfortable around Ted, and she had never seen that before in regards to the ear, and that's why she chose him, because that was her sign through her brother that was the guy for her.
Right, and especially when he remembered Ted after all those years of not seeing each other.
Frankenbeans, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're looking at the Colts situation, by announcing that they have agreed to terms with Alec Pierce, even before he can go into free agency, reading into that tells me that that means, in fact, they are close to, and just at this point, it's a matter of the announcement away from announcing that they are going to retain Daniel Jones and re-sign Daniel Jones, because to beyond just the transition tag. And because Alec Pierce had made it very clear going into it that Daniel Jones was a big part of why he would want to be here. So what we know is this: Alec Pierce has agreed in principle to a 4-year, reportedly, $114 million deal with the Colts. That would be $84 million guaranteed. In addition to that, yesterday they traded Zaire Franklin. They today have apparently agreed with Pittsburgh to trade Michael Pittman Jr. Now, that frees up some money there depending on what's coming back. Eddie, are we starting to get a better understanding as to what would be coming back from Pittsburgh?
All that is being reported is it's a late round pick swap, whatever that means.
And I can't recall, and Chappell will be able to answer this better when we have him on. I know in the NBA, for example,
you do not have to do that in the NFL.
You don't have to salary match, right?
No.
Okay.
You would have to assume, Jake, that since it's a late round pick swap, that means that the Steelers are willing to take on and pay the entirety of the contract for Michael Pittman Jr., no?
Pittman's contract, which already is being listed now on Pittsburgh's cap hit, is at $24 million. A $22 million base, $22 million base, $2 million roster bonus. So it looks as though Pittsburgh is absorbing that. So that frees up $24 million for the Colts now in terms of their cap. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if Daniel Jones was indeed looking for a contract that would pay him in the $50 million per range, okay? If that's true, if he had been healthy and never had injury and the Colts had continued on the trajectory they were headed, you can only imagine what some team would have done to escalate that price, meaning the Colts at that point probably would have had to franchise tag him, which means $47 million, so $10 million more than where they are right now, just to have him for the year. And then it would have come down to, would Chris Ballard have matched that and said, you know what, we'll match Arizona, we'll match Cleveland or New York, and we'll give this guy $55 million per year, which sounds astronomical, but it's $8 million more than what they would have had to pay in a franchise tag. In that case, that would have, I think, really handcuffed him. And the other thing would have been, he may have said, we're going to let him walk. He's healthy. He had a great year. He's a great player. We won a playoff game. But at $55 million a year, we're not going to pay that. And they may have let him walk, and then you're back to square one. So to some extent, that injury might have actually saved the Colts. Crazy as that sounds, that might have saved them a little bit. But things are moving and moving very quickly. And the breaking news sounder that we use, it sounds like this. This is not, we don't have breaking news, but it sounds like this. If you hear that, it does not mean that a Dolly Madison snack cake commercial is upcoming. If you know, you know.
I can give you
It simply
something.
means pay attention.
I can give you something if you want something with the breaking news sounder there, Jake. Malik Willis is signed with the Miami Dolphins, 3 years, $67.5 million. And then Isaiah Likely, formerly with the Baltimore Ravens, follows his head coach during his time in Baltimore to New York, and he signs with the Giants, 3 years, $40 million.
I had heard that was likely.
Okay. Neville Gallimore, by the way, who had some nice production for the Colts this year, just signed a 2-year deal worth $12 million to go to the Chicago Bears. Back-to-back offseasons now where Chicago has inked a defensive lineman free agent from the Colts.
And Kansas City did what Kansas City does, right? And adding themselves a little bit of insurance policy offensively. Is that right?
Yeah, they go after the Super Bowl MVP, Kenneth Walker, to shore up that running back room, which means now you have to wonder, Jake, where does Jeremiah Love go in the draft? Because I know a lot of people had him pegged there at 10 to Kansas City. It was either 9 or 10. I can't remember the exact range for Kansas City, but wonder what that means for the former Notre Dame star running back now.
Eddie, is Chap available to join us?
Here in 4 minutes?
Yes.
I can find out.
Okay, because I know he's going to be busy, but I think he's going to join us other side.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Okay, so Mike Chappell going to join us here coming up just about 10 minutes from now. Alec Pierce in the mix with the Colts, and I'm telling you, that means that he knows Daniel Jones is going to be in the mix. That's the easiest way to interpret that. I'm always curious of this, and I'm simply being a semantic overthinker here, Eddie. But when you hear things like legal tampering, we're in the period of legal tampering. What does that mean? Legal tampering.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that and tampering? Right?
It was funny.
Tampering means illegal, does it not? It's an oxymoron, isn't it? Legal tampering. Just say precursor to signing that. Like, what? Like you can start talking now, but you can't actually sign anything? Okay. Just call it negotiation period. The negotiation period is opened.
Yeah.
Easiest way to say it, right?
I just don't understand what the point of it is, because there were reports this morning before the legal tampering period opened that Rashawn Gary, who ends up getting traded from Green Bay to Dallas, was in discussions about a contract with the Cowboys. Like, how do these discussions happen already if it's not during the legal tampering period?
Yeah, I mean, that's... Now, when I said earlier, when Alec Pierce, from the end of the season, made it very clear that Daniel Jones was an integral reason and part why he would re-sign here, and that the quarterback situation and position, there were basically three things that Alec Pierce made very clear. Three things that he made very clear. That he wanted in where he was going to sign. Money, it goes without saying, right? That goes without saying. But he said, I want to be targeted more in an offense of, say, 100 targets. And he also said that Daniel Jones was an important part of his thought process in terms of staying in Indianapolis. And that he thought when Daniel Jones was healthy, he loved where their offense was. Now, as soon as it was announced that Alec Pierce was re-signing, I said, that tells me that he knows Daniel Jones is going to get more than just 1 year here. He would not sign for 3 years if he thought they were going to do a transition tag with Daniel Jones, and then all of a sudden he was going to be catching footballs from, nothing against Riley Leonard, but Riley Leonard or like the next draftee project. And several people have said to me, dude, he has 114 million reasons to sign here. He would have gotten that anywhere. He was going to be the top wide receiver target in free agency. There are a ton of teams that were going to give him and were prepared to give him a ton of money. So that would have been, that's simply my point. If you look at, he was in now it is a draft that does seemingly have some wide receiver targets within it. Michael Pittman Jr. on his way to Pittsburgh, and wide receiver is a position that takes, wide receiver is a crock pot position. It's a crock pot position. So is quarterback. Those are two positions that you basically have to let them simmer and burn for a while, for a long time, in a slow process before you finally get the full flavor. Alec Pierce, a prime example. There were plenty of us in this town. I can't recall if I was one of them, if I said it, but I certainly was thinking of like, man, was this guy really like when is this going to get going? And obviously now it has. And certainly Reggie Wayne was one of those guys. You know, it's very seldom. Randy Moss, the biggest anomaly about Randy Moss, aside from just the overall freak, the speed, the hand-eye, all of it, Randy Moss came out of the womb in the NFL ready to play. He was in Minnesota, and they had he had, 3 catches on Thanksgiving in his rookie year, and it's like, holy cow, this guy is a different level, different animal. And it was very clear from the beginning that Randy Moss could flat out play. But most wide receivers, it takes a while for them to just understand the defenses. The biggest thing that I always go to is the window. Just, being open at the NFL level is different than being open at the college level. It just is. And guys that in college, the very best of the best. If separation typically is what allowed them to get open in college, then in the NFL, that separation is not there, and it takes them they have to then learn routes and timing. That's why a guy like an Elijah Surratt, who is not necessarily a burner to get open guy, but a precision to get open guy, may have a shorter gestation period than a typical wide receiver. Alec Pierce is one that seemingly was always from the line able to get himself open in college. He had to learn a little bit more about the openness in the NFL. And then, of course, it didn't help that he was primarily in the beginning a deep ball guy, and they didn't have anybody to get the deep ball with consistency to him in the beginning, and now theoretically they do. Joining us now on the Java House Cold Brew Coffee guest line to go over all of this. Ton to get to with Mike Chappell of CBS 4 and Fox 59. Chap, first question I will ask you right out of the box. Alec Pierce agreeing to terms, does that tell you that he believes that, in fact, Daniel Jones is right around the corner as the next to ink a multi-year deal?
Yeah, I won't be surprised if that gets done today, tomorrow. I'm not sure how close they were with the transition tag, but I think they're close. And again, I'm trying to think what I saw with Pierce's guaranteed money. It was monster.
84.
Yeah, I mean that's what talks. The 4 years and all that, it helps with cap numbers and all that, but guaranteed money talks. I think that probably had something to do with Pierce staying. Is they've been up front and said, we're working on this, we're going to get it done. So yeah, it was always going to be a package deal if they could. So good for them. And then I saw they traded Pitt to Pitt. Good for Pittman, because there was no way they were going to be able to have Pittman and Pierce on the same roster moving forward. It just doesn't work. So one thing that maybe we've talked about, and I still believe this wholeheartedly, they need another receiver. They need another receiver,
especially now with Pittman gone, right?
Well, see, Pierce wants to do more, and he was like fourth on the team with 84 targets or whatever it was, and he's going to get more, but he still needs to be the quality guy, not so much quantity. And if he gets 120 targets, he's not averaging 20 yards a catch. He's just not. So they need someone else in there. Maybe the draft. They've had very good luck with second round draft picks, except for A.D. Mitchell. So I think that's maybe a possibility. I would probably prefer a veteran that you can get relatively cheap, whatever that is by today's standards. So they need another receiver so that Pierce all of a sudden is. See, I never really viewed Pittman as a true one. I just didn't. And right now I don't view Pierce as a one. I just don't. He's very, very good, elite at what he does.
But he's more versatile a receiver. I don't disagree with you, Chap, but and when I say he, I mean Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce is a more versatile receiver than he was when he entered the league. Do you agree with that?
No question. And you mentioned, too, part of the reason that he didn't really emerge early is that they go back and look. If you ever break up game tapes and all that, look the first couple of years, how many times he was wide open deep, and they either couldn't or wouldn't get the ball to him. I remember Reggie Wayne talking, said, yeah, I got these 12 plays where he's open. And at the time, the quarterbacks didn't have the capabilities or the desire to look deep. So, yeah, this is, again, he's got so much room to grow. And when you pay a guy, he even said that when he talked to the one podcast, that, when you're paid like that, they want more out of you. They expect more out of you. And that's the way it is. So yeah, it's this they move on, and this is the way if you're fortunate, draft picks work. You hit on Pitt, and he's pretty good, and then comes time to re-sign him, and you re-sign him, and he's pretty good, and then you draft Pierce, and he's pretty good, and comes time to re-sign him, then you got to re-sign him, and it caught. They overpaid for him. Let's be honest, they overpaid to keep Alec Pierce, but that's what this time of year is. You'd rather overpay for your own guys than overpay for somebody who you've seen from afar and you really don't know as much about. So this is a good day so far for the Colts, and they're probably not done.
Okay, Chap, here's the cynic in me, okay?
Yep.
I want to present to you like a study, and then I want you as the professor, the dean, if you will, to grade my...
To put red marks all over it?
Correct. Here's my thesis. My statement simply would be, there is a cautionary tale before us. There's a cautionary tale before us of how high we do the backflip over the fact that the Colts have signed and kept Alec Pierce as a free agent and prohibited him from going into free agency, and doing so by shedding salary of trading away Michael Pittman for a ham sandwich. Because, in fact, Michael Pittman was the last guy we did this with where they had to have him. They had to have him. You got to re-sign Michael Pittman Jr. Yeah. What's the latest on Pittman? They signed Michael Pittman Jr. Hooray, thank goodness, bring the parade. There's a cautionary tale there.
Well, yeah, but they didn't overpay grossly on Pittman at all. They got him at a pretty good price at the time because they signed him before all the receiver contracts went crazy, and they got good stuff out of Pittman. They got a good career out of Pittman. He tailed off last year, but he's going to the right place. You talked about Pittsburgh tough. He is as tough. Of course, they're one of the teams that lit him up with that illegal shot.
Of course, we have no idea who's going to be throwing to him, but yes.
Right. And it's, again, that was important for Pierce to have Jones here longer than the transition tag. But no, this is the way it works. I'm waiting, and when we get off here, I'll check social media, and it's going to happen. People are going to be up in arms that the Colts paid this much for Alec Pierce. And they would have been the same ones pissed off if they didn't re-sign Alec Pierce. So you can't win. But he's 20. He's going to be 26, and his game's got so much room to grow. This is not a bad signing. Again, you're going to overpay because look at all these contracts coming up today. They're all going to be overpaid. They are. If you're going to, and again, Jim Irsay was always good at this. Is you'd rather overpay for your own because you know them. You know the good, the bad, and all that stuff. So I thought they got good mileage. Pitt's like 5th in franchise history in catches and like 7th in yards. Now the touchdowns were lacking, but he was as good of a Colt. When they all throw out that he's a Colt guy. He's a Colt. Well, yeah, Pittman was, and I think Pierce will be too. So it's just the evolution of the position. And they still lack that guy. They still lack Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and on, those half a dozen guys. 20 teams lack that guy. So what we saw last year here we go again with the small sample size of 10 games. But when they had the right pieces in place, they were darn good. That's why I say they've got to find somehow to replace some of Pitt's targets and what Pitt did underneath and the tough catches and allow Pierce to sort of be the underneath guy occasionally, but still fly because that's what he does. That's what he does. And with Tyler Warren and Josh Downs is due to kind of bounce back after a quiet year last year. So yeah, this is when they told us when Chris Fowler told us at the combine that Daniel and Alec are the big pieces, and then we fill around, we mold from there. That's exactly the right thing, and that's what they're doing. And like I said, I won't be surprised at all if they get Jones done soon. And then all of a sudden you got some cap space. I've not seen what Pierce's cap number is. It won't be whatever the average of the contract is. What is it? And I've been kind of busy this morning, but is it 4 years, $116 million? That's like 20.
4-year, 114, I think, was originally what I saw.
So it's about 29 a year. His cap number is going to be lower initially because they need it needs to be. So this is, and again, whether this works or not is all going to be upon Daniel Jones. I don't care how expansive Alec Pierce's game gets to be and all this stuff. If Jones doesn't work, then it's not going to work. None of it's going to work. So I applaud him for doing it. And I know they were catching hell that they didn't get it done until that time. But that's when deals get done. That's when a lot of the guys, the really big deals get done. Is when it's the old deadline spur actions. That's true in everything you do. So good for them. And I'm sorry to see Pitt go, but they were going to cut him if they couldn't trade him. They were going to cut Zaire Franklin if they couldn't trade him.
Chap, when you look at that, okay, so they trade Zaire Franklin for a 25-year-old, looks to be solid but not great pass rushing.
Started 16 games for the Packers last year.
A run-stopping, not pass rushing, but a run-stopping defensive tackle. A Grover Stewart light, right?
Probably more DeForest Buckner type, but yeah.
Okay, I'm using light in air quotes there.
Right.
But you look at that. Michael Pittman Jr. now is on his way to Pittsburgh. Alec Pierce is back in the mix, and we know at least for the year, unless someone comes with an offer that's unbelievable, that Daniel Jones is going to be your quarterback. Are the Indianapolis Colts right now better than they were 3 months ago?
If I knew who's going to take Pittman's place, I'd say yes.
What if it's a rookie?
I'd say yes. Well, yes.
Do they have the money to go out and get Pittman's replacement at the level of experience and or production of Pittman?
No. So it's going to be a guy that maybe it's that I hate to say that veteran guy that'll be left over because they've had such bad luck with that guy. When Donnie Avery's your best free agent signing, and that was in 2012, you've not done a great job with it. So I still think they have a chance to be better. Now this is if Jones comes back come August and he's playing at a decent level, which they hope, but you don't know. So yeah, and in the defense, yes, because the defense is going to be better. It is. You're gonna knock on wood. You're gonna have two top line corners. Your safety is going to be here another year, and they were going to replace. They were going to redo the linebacker, and you're apparently going to get Buckner back. So yes, as we sit here now, barring injuries or bad rehabs, they will be better than they were. Maybe when they were 8-2, that's a stretch, but I think this can be a playoff challenger. If they add a few pieces here and there, and they're important pieces. Again, it's another receiver. They need a pass rusher. I hope they clear some space and get a pass rusher. That's the primary need right now. I'd take a 10-sack guy over and I'd let the receiver position kind of be on the back burner over getting a pass rusher.
Chap, do you believe that Zaire Franklin was moved A because they had to get cap flexible, B, because they felt that line was more important than linebacker, or C, because while a really nice guy, they felt like some of the off-field stuff was too much a distraction?
I would say D, his production had fallen off, and he just wasn't a fit in this defense. The distractions were just that, and they let him know that those needed to quiet down. The cap space, they created $5 million, which is kind of significant, but not really because they were going to cut Pittman. With trading Pittman, to create $24 million cap space. I think more the fact that they had gotten about as much out of their seventh round draft pick that year, and they were going to move on, not because of the distractions and not because of all. But because he just really didn't fit. Ballard told us again they wanted to get younger and faster in the front seven, and that was part of it.
Again, Alec Pierce is, if you're just joining us, Alec Pierce earlier today announced agreeing to a term with the Colts, 4-year, $114 million. There are some variation of report of what the total guaranteed money is. Some say $80 million, some say $84. That was the initial report. Guaranteed at sign of 60 is also out there. But either way, Alec Pierce is agreeing to terms. And then Daniel Jones, while close, there is not yet any report. Chap, to me, did the Colts – I'm going to go back to this point. We can say the Colts and I'm using air quotes again, that they overpaid for Alec Pierce. But did they overpay over the market value? Because it is my belief and why I say it seems as though this is a precursor to an inevitable Jones announcement. The reason I say that is because Pierce has said that he wants, that point, right? He really Jones was an important aspect. He would have gotten this amount of money if he'd gone on the open market, right?
He might have gotten more.
Yeah.
See, that was my whole point about if he gets a chance to talk to other teams, somebody probably would have paid him $30 million a year. There was, and again, the stuff you read on the internet now is just so much of it is just garbage. Frisco was ready to pay $30 million, and you don't know that, but I'm sure that Pierce's agent had a pretty darn good idea what somebody's going to pay. Now, that guaranteed money might have been quite a bit more than anybody else would have paid. So no, Jones had to, or Pierce had to have some idea what was out there. But I really think all things being equal, and when you're talking a few million, I don't know if that's equal or not. I think a player likes to stay where he is, where you're comfortable. And again, he's got a good relationship with Jones. And again, I do think the fact that I think they can get Jones done. And maybe Chris Ballard said, listen, we're not that far away. It's our intention. And if you get Jones done at a more reasonable rate than the transition tag, you create more cap space.
Well, and one would assume those two probably talked, right? I mean, if I'm Pierce, you're immediately
all those guys talk. That's what. And one thing to tell your listeners, when you see this legal tampering, that's just wrong. If it's legal, it's not tampering. It's a 3-day negotiation period.
They ought to just call it open negotiation, right?
Right. Tampering is when you're not now. I think tampering went on at the combine. You don't get these deals done in 5 minutes after the noon deadline without having some groundwork laid at the combine or with these teams. So that's done. The league just hasn't got the desire to put an end to. I don't know how you'd put an end to it.
It's like getting a ticket for legal speeding.
Yes. Well, yeah. Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's legal, so it's not tampering. So please, it's a cute thing to say, but it's not legal tampering. It's the 3-day negotiation period when teams are allowed to approach other players.
Chap, you were at the combine, and my understanding is, and we never know with these things sometimes until well after the fact, but I have read or heard at least that this is thought to be a decent draft for receivers.
Right.
Omar Cooper Jr., the kid out of Lawrence North and Indiana, and Elijah Surratt out of Indiana, both were really good players for Fernando Mendoza. And we in Indiana assume that means they're going to be really good NFL players. But we're also here, so we have that bias. What was the narrative within the combine? Where do they seemingly slot? And is one of those guys, for example, somebody that can give depth to Indianapolis?
Omar Cooper probably more higher thought of, I think, with a higher ceiling. Whenever I saw Surratt, it's funny, I saw a mini Michael Pittman. I just did.
I would agree with that. Like a big, tough, over-the-middle guy that catches things, but not a breakaway guy, right?
Right. And would they look at one of those guys? I think I would look at a receiver with that first pick in the second round, whatever it is in early in the second round. So, but both of them are quality players, and again, if you get a draft pick, second round, third round, then you can't expect him to be a 50 catch guy right away. A veteran guy might give you more. So yeah, but either one, I wouldn't mind at all. Obviously different type of receivers, but both those guys are going to be really good players in the NFL, and a lot of time it depends on where you go, but sometimes you're just good enough, you're going to be good wherever you are.
Mike Chappell will have all the coverage, CBS 4, WXIN, Fox 59 as well on this busy day that inevitably is the entrance into a busy stretch here for Chappell, and we will continue to have him on. Chappell, appreciate the time as always.
Thank you.
All right, Mike Chappell joining us on the program. All right, so Eddie, I will let you kind of scour through and tell me if there's anything of note that we have missed here so far today, because in the first, we're doing the furled double flags, meaning that we're halfway through here on the day, and already we have seen a flurry of activity at the outset of this race, so to speak, right?
Yes, we certainly have. Some more on the Pittman front, Jake. The Pittsburgh Steelers are also giving him an extension. 3 years, $59 million in total for Pittman with the Steelers. Still no exact terms on what pick swaps or what the pick swap is between the Colts and the Steelers. Amik Robertson, he's a cornerback, signs with the Commanders. Alex Anzalone, linebacker, signs with the Bucks. Kenneth Gainwell, who was with Pittsburgh last year, signs a 2-year to go down to Tampa. There's a report out there that Mike Evans is receiving offers north of $27 million per year right now, as his free agency is starting to heat up a little bit. The Jets have been very active today with signing defensive free agents, a guy who I thought could have been potentially with the Indianapolis Colts just because of his ties with the Cincinnati Bengals and Lou Anarumo. Joseph Osai, one of those players. He's an edge rusher. I think he's 25 years old. He also goes to the Jets. There has not been anything on the Trey Hendrickson front. No reports on, hey, these are the teams that have expressed interest or what his market is going to look like. Malik Willis going to the Packers today.
You mean to the Dolphins?
Yes. Thank you. From the Packers to the Dolphins. Isaiah Likely from the Ravens to the Giants.
Malik Willis is an intriguing name.
Oh,
because
Jalen Phillips.
Malik Willis is one. Hang on just a second. Malik Willis is one that, to me, the reason I'm intrigued by Malik Willis and the money he's gotten and his rising profile within this free agency is part of the level of play and appreciation that was generated about Malik Willis this year was generated off of the tempered expectations about him because of the fact that when he, in his first go-round as a starter, he kind of failed to cement himself. And then all of a sudden, in spot situations, he played really well. Kudos to him in that regard. But then all of a sudden, it's like, wow, this guy can play. Well, can he, or is it just proof that you better have really good players around him, and we only were judging it not based on what we were seeing, but based on our expectation of what we would see of him because of what we saw of him as a young player? And then the other one you were going to mention?
Jalen Phillips. He was one of those premier edge free agents with the Dolphins, and then he got traded to the Eagles. 4 years, $120 million to the Carolina Panthers. Last week, the Los Angeles Rams traded for Trent McDuffie from the Kansas City Chiefs. They now signed the other starting quarterback from Kansas City last year, Jalen Watson, earlier today as well. Oh, Kenneth Walker to the Chiefs as well.
Kenneth Walker's the one that just seems so perfect in an Andy Reid offense.
Yeah.
You can already see now some late December game. Patrick Mahomes is back. You're tired of the Chiefs. You think they're going to lose. It's 4th and 8, a minute and a half to go, and then they draw up some screen to Kenneth Walker, and he gets a 12-yard gain, and here we go.
And if you care at all, Travis Kelce is going back to the Chiefs for a 14th season.
Probably still. I mean, isn't he another one, though, that you just automatically assume he's about to make a play?
Yeah.
We come back. We'll get you the schedule on a different sport, but of similar level of interest. Games, and now we know in the games people play who they'll be playing. I'll explain what I'm talking about next.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Okay, here are the games that are getting ready to be played. Dave Revson tomorrow, right basically off the top of the show to get us set for the Big Ten basketball tournament. Horizon League tonight, semifinals at Corteva Coliseum. That is at the Indiana State Fairgrounds. If I believe this is correct, Oakland and Robert Morris is the nightcap. Northern Kentucky and Wright State at 7 o'clock tonight over at the Coliseum. Big Ten men's tournament coming up in Chicago. These are all of the things that we can discuss, that and more, including the Alec Pierce signing, Daniel Jones that I think is close. All of those things you can ask us about, talk about. We can relive all of it at the golf outing taking place, the Fan Invitational 2026 golf outing on April 30th from 10:30 until 5 in the afternoon at Legends Golf Club. That is down in Franklin. That is a wonderful golf facility, believe you me. You want to talk state-of-the-art, that is state-of-the-art. You too can go see where Bob Knight filmed some of his golfing show, by the way. Enjoy 18 holes of golf, and we will all be there, as well as Franciscan Health and the Franciscan Health Foundation, because that is who we are helping out with this, but they are the ones that are the true helpers because they'll have health screenings there. They will answer your questions for you of different things. Maybe, you want to go out and golf and you got a question that you don't necessarily want people to know that you're asking about it, about your health, then Franciscan is there for all of it. And we look forward to all that. April 30th, information available, 1075thefan.com. Eddie, we are going to play a fun game here. Are you ready?
I always love games with you, Jake.
And if you have already looked this up, then just humor me. Don't even admit that you have done so and just play along.
Okay.
Do you happen to have the ding and or buzzer sound effect? Okay. I am going to read to you the seed in the NCAA men's basketball tournament. And without looking, I want you to tell me what team you think it is, and I will tell you whether it is a ding or a buzz. Are you ready?
Okay.
We'll begin with who is the 6th seed?
The 6th seed?
Don't look.
I'm not.
You look straight at me. 6th seed. Show's over at 3, so boom, 6th seed. Go ahead.
I don't know.
Guess.
I don't know, Jake. I don't like to get Wisconsin.
UCLA is the 6th seed in the Big Ten men's tournament. There's a reason we're doing this. The 5 seed is
Wisconsin.
That is correct. The 4th seed in the Big Ten men's basketball tournament.
Michigan State.
Illinois is the 4th seed. 3rd seeded.
Michigan State.
The 2nd seed is who? Who is the number 2
seed? That would be the
seed?
Fighting Illini, correct?
Did we skip over 4? Illinois is 4th.
Oh, 2 would be Nebraska then, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And the number 1 seed is Michigan.
Yeah.
It is somewhat surreal to think that we did not mention Purdue in that. The Boilers are the 7 seed, and it does feel like they're backpedaling. No question about that. And when you look at Purdue's season in general and on a whole, I think I don't know where this is going to go, to be honest with you, because it is one that, and open disclaimer, I mean, I felt for certain, like a lot of people, I felt like at the beginning of the year that I'm not going to say they were a slam dunk. I mean, in today's college basketball, you would be a fool to say that. But it felt to me like they were an absolute front-running contender for the Final Four. Not just the Big Ten, but the Final Four. And I don't know, Oscar Clough has been a good player for them, but he looks at this point like he could use a John Riggins oxygen tank at any time. And I think learning how to play with Trey Kaufman-Renn was a challenge for Purdue, and Trey Kaufman-Renn learning how to play with him. But that is a team with with Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer and obviously Trey Kaufman-Renn. Here's what I love about Purdue. Has Purdue fallen short this year so far? Maybe. Can they salvage that still? Sure. But at its core, in a world where college basketball and NIL, you heard Don Fischer talking about it earlier. The difficulties, the challenges, the unfair and unreasonable fan expectation, the consistent transfer portal, big dollar NIL, money grab, me first era of college athletics overall. And look at Trey Kaufman-Renn. And before him, Caleb Furst. Caleb Furst, to me, is so impressive because here was an Indiana Mr. Basketball, a big-time recruit, goes to Purdue, gets tons of minutes early. Zach Edey develops well beyond anybody's expectation, and the spotlight, the minutes, and everything starts then moving away from Caleb Furst, who was completely content with continuing to play, doing anything he had to win for his team, and getting a degree and then going to, and I'm assuming he's in med school. I know that was the narrative or the discussion of what he was expected to do. And I like what Darren DeVries is building in Indiana. I do. I do think that he's a good coach, and that is a team in Indiana that you can talk about their falling short this year, but I think they've gotten the most out of themselves from a talent standpoint, and they seemingly get along, play hard, and don't misrepresent their university. And I have the utmost respect for Purdue, who will open the Big Ten tournament again against the winner. On Thursday is Purdue's next game. They will play the winner of Indiana, and then Indiana plays the winner of Northwestern Penn State. And they'll go into it, and you'll say, this is a team that has fallen short this year of where we thought they'd be because they're the 7th seed in the Big Ten tournament. But then you hear Trey Kaufman-Renn just talk about college basketball today and being an elder statesman on a program where he stayed at Purdue, and I just thought what he said was great.
You know, as a kid our age, and then, 18, 19-year-olds, just the level of, if they can have just some understanding of the level of, growth that you experience with, the guys on your team and how much you learn, just, being a human being, being a person, going to different schools and for paychecks, for different things. You're right, you may get more money, but, how much, what are we putting, what's the dollar amount on the relationships that I've built? What's the dollar amount on, the values that I've learned? For me, it's an easy thing. So I just, I think it's more of a value thing at this point. You'd hope that the younger guys and then, their parents are teaching them the right thing.
I just think that is such a mature viewpoint and vantage point. And, the value of the relationships, and there is some truth perhaps to the fact that Purdue's has been compromised. Is there some sort of chemistry challenge that comes with everyone knowing that this player's getting this amount and this player's not, and this player was shopping around or asking around for this versus that? Maybe.
Jake, you have siblings, right?
I do. I'm the youngest of 3.
Did you ever make them mad?
Yes.
Because you would take too long in the shower in the morning to get ready, or you kind of delayed their process?
Well, I'm the
ready?
youngest of 2. I have 2 older sisters, so
right.
You can imagine the shower time deviation. But I will tell you this. The song Reunited by Peaches and Herb, I broke my sister's 45 when I was a kid, and it did not go well. Yes.
But that's just kind of what it feels like with Purdue, is they've all been together for so long.
Correct. I would agree.
You just start getting into these nitpicky things because you're just so used to one another, and eventually you just kind of get frustrated.
Yes, I think that's very accurate. And, there's like anything else, Eddie, if you have a young team that's not played around each other a lot, you get hostility because people don't know or understand the tendencies of the other. Then you get a veteran team that's been around each other too much, and exactly that comes into play. You got to find that sweet spot, right?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you and your 2 sisters and Purdue and Braden Smith, Trey Kaufman-Renn, and Fletcher Lawyer, they'll all come back together, get it figured out at the end of the day.
You would hope. You would hope. And,
Yeah.
Now is the time to do it, though, for certain.
Mm-hmm.
No question about that. All right, figuring it out and siblings working with one another. Is it possible the Colts are on the precipice now of finding out that for the next 3 to 4 years, that's exactly going to be the case with two of the big ones? We'll explain. Hey there, it's Jake Query for Love Heating and Air. Love-HVAC.com is the website. 317-353-2141 is the telephone number for an official Heil Heating and Cooling dealer. Love Heating and Air, the very best when it comes to taking care of your home, serving Marion and all of the donut counties and 4 generations deep of family business. But listen, I could sit here and tell you until basically 3 o'clock today what the Love family has meant to me and the integrity that I've witnessed in the way they go about doing their business. But rather, I would simply tell you this. When you have lasted that long in this area, it means that there is not a home, not a configuration, not an architecture, not a challenge they have not dealt with. That's why they are the very best, because they come into your home with that integrity, so you know that you are letting them into your house and that they are not going to try to upsell you on something that doesn't need to be done. They're going to be honest, but there is nothing that they have not seen before in terms of whether it is that you have like humidity issues or you just can't get the right temperature because your house is more arid than others. Whatever it might be, Love Heating and Air is the answer for you. Love-HVAC.com, an official Heil Heating and Cooling dealer.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Eddie, what time, just out of curiosity, not that it's any of my business, but you worked the Pacer game late, right?
I was here until 1 a.m.
And then you messaged me, and I said that I was like, yeah, you're not going to believe this, but I was flipping through last night and noticed that something about Mary was there, and you had not seen it yet. I mentioned it to you on Friday. And the next thing I know, you're watching it. So what time did you actually turn in last night?
Well, that conversation started by me texting you that Fast Times at Ridgemont High is back on Peacock. And then you told me you were watching something. There's something about Mary. Let's say it was after 3 a.m.
But did you watch it solo?
Yeah.
But you did enjoy it, right?
Yeah, it was good.
Okay. What about when Tucker puts his hat on and he does it in the hat? It's a good movie.
Yeah.
Okay, we got to the fact that the Big Ten tournament is getting underway up in Chicago. We also have some tickets to give away for the NCAA Final Four Fan Fest, April 3rd through the 6th. And that is, of course, where you can go through. It is very cool because it celebrates the history of the Final Four. Celebrity appearances, athlete appearances, autograph signings, all of that taking place at the Final Four Fan Fest from the Indiana Sports Corps. We will give those tickets away coming up in just a couple of minutes. But the big news of the day, and we will be talking about this primarily in the 2 o'clock hour, Alec Pierce agreeing to terms with the Colts earlier today, a 4-year deal worth $114 million with some conflicting reports on what the guaranteed is, but now it appears initially they said 84. Then there is some thought that it is a $60 million guarantee upon signing, but an $80 million guarantee in the lifetime of the contract itself. But either way, and you'll hear me say this in the 2 o'clock hour. Today is Monday. Is today the 9th?
Today is the 9th, yes, and it is Monday. Can confirm. Of March.
I will be stunned when we go on the air on Wednesday, which will be the day that Indiana will be previewing Indiana in the Big Ten tournament, for example. If and when we go on the air on, not if and when, I mean, hopefully, definitely if we're on the air, but when we go on the air on Wednesday, I believe by then we will already have news that Daniel Jones has agreed to a term with the Colts. Because I truly don't see any way. I'll put it to you in the form of a question, Eddie Garrison.
Okay.
If you are Alec Pierce, and I know that you have Daniel Jones for 1 year, if no one makes him an offer sheet that the Colts don't match. But if you are Alec Pierce,
yep.
What reason do you have to commit to Indianapolis unless you know for a fact that for the 3 years that you are signing or the 4 years that you are signing, that you are going to have a known entity at quarterback?
The only way I think you do that is if you either really, really, really like it here.
Right.
That's the only other. Or the money. And if the money was the case, there are reports out there that the Commanders offered over $30 million a year.
That's what I mean. He could have gotten the money elsewhere,
yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
He would have gotten the money elsewhere. And so that's the thing to me. I'm like, okay, Alec Pierce only agreed to this if he knew that Daniel Jones is going to be there. I firmly believe that. And now, the other thing is this. Could it be that the Colts looked at it and said, okay, for Alec Pierce and for his standpoint, we're getting ready to go into a situation where he has been transition tagged, meaning that somebody else, he is free to go talk to somebody else and get himself a better offer. But did they say, you know what, let's get Alec Pierce done? Did they work one with the other? Let's get Alec Pierce done so that we can then go to Daniel Jones and maybe he's willing to sign for not necessarily some wholesale bargain price, but he doesn't go aggressively to the negotiating table with others because he knows that Alec Pierce is here and there's familiarity. So they basically said to Pierce, look, we promise you, you sign here, Jones is going to be your guy. And then they went to Jones and said, you might as well sign here because Pierce is here and ready to be your guy. And bada boom, bada bing, there you go. But I would be stunned. I'm going to predict it's by tomorrow. I'm going to predict that do you happen to have, Eddie, the breaking news sounder? I'm going to predict that that's what we're going to be playing tomorrow at some point because we're going to announce that it's a done deal and that Jones is in the mix.
Do you think the Colts would discuss a contract with Kyler Murray at all? Kind of feel it out to see, like, hey, how much are you thinking here?
I mean, do I think they will now or do I think they would have?
Will.
Maybe you say to Alec Pierce, look, it's going to be Jones or Murray. We're not sure which one, but are you happy with that?
Because even though they have applied the transition tag on Daniel Jones, they can rescind it.
Correct.
And just say, all right, and make him an unrestricted free agent.
Correct.
Although Stephen Holder of ESPN seems pretty likely that Daniel Jones will be a Colt, was the direct quote.
I think it's I'm not going to say it's a done deal. You never say that, but I'd be stunned if it's not. But there's other news to get to with the Colts that does not involve the quarterback and the wide receiver. Kind of. We will get into that, and we will give away tickets for the aforementioned Fan Fest for the Final Four. We'll do all of that within the next 30. Hey there, it's Jake Query for Game Day Men's Health. Avon, Fisher's, Greenwood, Carmel, the locations for Game Day Men's Health. The Carmel location in particular where I went in is just fabulous. They all are. So too with Fisher's that has opened up with Game Day Men's Health. I'm talking about peptide therapy, testosterone therapy, weight loss therapy. Basically, if you're a guy and you've been feeling that sluggish feel, you're 40, you get that midday nap, you just don't feel 18 again. You don't have the same energy. The workouts come with a greater recovery time, a little more soreness. Then Game Day Men's Health has a number of therapies designed for you. And just like when it's game day, you come up with a game plan, and it's specific to the opponent. In this case, it's specific to the participant with Game Day Men's Health, a game plan that is best suited for you. Clinics that are efficient, that are friendly, that are clean, and that have FDA-approved pharmacies. Everything that you love about Game Day Men's Health. Look them up online, find out all of the therapies they provide, and find an appointment time that is best for a consultation for you. GameDayMen'sHealth.com. That's GameDayMen'sHealth.com. Jake Query here for Chicago's Pizza. Thinking about it, you're going to be watching a lot of basketball upcoming. Whatever it might be, whether it's dine in, carry out, Chicago's Pizza is the answer for you. And how about the family meal deal? Listen, the Chicago's Pizza, you got a wide array of pizzas. You've got the Chicago's style of pizza, the deep dish pizza. You have traditional. You've also got thin and crispy. You've got the dessert pizza. And don't even get me started on the breadsticks, which are fresh rolled and baked every single day. But Chicago's Pizza takes a pride not only in their pizza with a story in every slice, but their community. And that's why they have 19 locations around central Indiana, 25 statewide. And they want to help you out with the family meal deal. Just $25, just $25 for 2 medium, 1 topping pizzas and the breadsticks, all for just $25. Every day, the lunch buffet, don't forget about it, from 11 until 1:30. That's just $13 and includes the salad bar. Chicago's Pizza. Find them online at chicagospizza.com. Find the location near you, chicagospizza.com.
This is Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
It is 2 o'clock on a Monday. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison, the other voice you hear in this program. It's Query and Company here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. All right, let's get you caught up on this day of NFL news, and it is newsy to say the least. But we will begin from a Colts standpoint, and we'll go kind of in backward order, if that makes sense. For starters, Zaire Franklin, their linebacker over the last few years, of course, who has been a captain and been a leader and kind of a quarterback of that defense. I think we knew that just based on the production dwindling a little bit. He's 29 years old, so he's approaching, I think usually 31, 32 is when you start to go, I don't know. But Zaire Franklin traded over the weekend to Green Bay. Now, he is traded for a younger player, a 25-year-old, who from Green Bay comes in as basically a run stopper. 16 starts in 16 games last year, correct, Eddie?
16 starts, yes.
And this is not somebody, Grover Stewart, and this is what's intriguing to me. Grover Stewart is, I believe, entering the last year of his contract, and he's been a really good player.
Yep. $12.5 million is the cap hit.
And I would imagine in Grover Stewart's case, we'll see whether or not this is an insurance policy. That would surprise me, because I think when you look at Grover Stewart, he's been a well-liked but very, very productive player. Very productive player. But Colby Wooden is 25 years old. He's out of Auburn. And he's not anybody that jumps out and astounds you in terms of his stats, but he is certainly, competent. 6'4", 275, bigger body. I don't know that you would list him necessarily as a pass rush specialist. But that's what they're getting in that regard. So Zaire Franklin now, already with his thank you to Indianapolis, he is on his way to Green Bay. Then you start taking a look at, okay, what about the offense? And what about the quarterback situation? And I mentioned off the top of the show, and believe you me, I had literally an award-winning Marconi-esque, like going to go down in history, put me in the Indiana Broadcaster Hall of Fame level soliloquy about all of this today. But a funny thing happened, and that's what happens in life itself. I had this big monologue ready about how the Daniel Jones injury might actually have saved Chris Ballard. And the reason for that, or the reason I was thinking that, is because when you really break it down, Chris Ballard, in his time as a general manager of the Colts, a decade, a playoff win, he had a quarterback retire on him. And that quarterback in Andrew Luck, there probably is some truth that Andrew Luck's, that retirement was as much on Andrew Luck as anybody. Andrew Luck's decision to the way he played, to not step out of bounds, to try to lower the shoulder, to hang in the pocket too long, to snowboard, all of those things. But either way, in the quarterbacking game, Chris Ballard seemingly had multiple quarterbacks where injuries just changed the narrative and the game plan. They had veteran quarterbacks that got dinged up. They signed one guy in Carson Wentz that this was going to be the long-term answer, and then it turned out like the owner didn't like him. You had, just on and on and on. Anthony Richardson, their big project, and yes, Anthony Richardson had a lot of faults in his own right, but at the same time, he was stunted as well by the fact that he couldn't stay healthy. Sometimes his fault, sometimes not. And I began to think about the fact that when you look at the situation of Daniel Jones going into a free agency period with his contract up, maybe health has been the Achilles heel of the Colts forever at the quarterback spot. But maybe, just maybe, for once, you actually had a situation where an Achilles injury helped them. Because the Colts knew going into the year, let's say for the sake of the discussion, that Daniel Jones had never gotten hurt. And let's say that the 7-1 Colts or the 8-2 Colts were the reality of what they were, and that's the trajectory they were headed, and they get into the playoffs, and let's say they win a playoff game, maybe even two. In that case, Alec Pierce probably would have been a slam dunk to resign, because who would have left that situation? And he looks at the fact Daniel Jones is throwing him the ball, and he's like, let's go. But you still had the obstacle of signing Jones and retaining him. Now, in this little hypothetical we're doing, Daniel Jones, if he was coming off a season where he continued the way that he had before the injury and he had not gotten hurt and they had won a playoff game or two, his price would have been astronomical. Life's all about timing. And in this situation that I'm thankful that you're giving me the time to spell out for you, in that situation, in that timing, Daniel Jones would have walked into it and said, I'm the top free agent quarterback, partially because it's a dry year for quarterbacks in free agency, but also because of what I'm coming off of the year of production that I just had. And so he would have been able to go in and say, I want a 4-year deal, minimum $200 million total contract. And you could say that sounds absurd, except for that the franchise tag, which the Colts probably would have been forced to slap on him at that point, was in itself worth $47 million per year for the year. And in that situation, Ballard would have been kind of at a rock and a hard place, because if he signs Daniel Jones for $50 to $52 million per year, and that's what it would have taken to get him here, he would have been doing so, A, to cement that he gets Alec Pierce, and B, because it's the top free agent quarterback out there, and they're coming off a playoff win or two, and the whole city's in love with Daniel Jones. But if it goes south at all, and Daniel Jones, as he started to do this year, don't forget, started to regress a little bit, and Pittsburgh threw that blueprint on how to beat him, if those things started to rear their ugly head, then you're really in a pickle, because you got a quarterback that you grossly overpaid, and ask the Giants how you get out of that situation. Or the other scenario would have been that they basically get into a situation where they're like, we can't afford to pay that kind of money, and then you lose him. You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. But the injury avoided all of that. But what we found out earlier today was that even with the injury avoiding that predicament of rocking a hard place, there still was something presented to Chris Ballard because it appears as though they were willing to give him Sam Darnold money. They were willing to give him money of, say, 3 year and $100 million. And Jones's camp came back and said, we still want $50 million per year. Now, Daniel Jones, I don't think, was realistically saying that he expected $50 million. But if he knew the Colts were paying 40 or were going to possibly have to pay $47 million in a franchise tag, and if they've transition tagged him at $37 million, then you're saying, okay, if they're transition tagging me at $37 million, they're probably willing to pay $45. And if they're willing to pay $45, I'm just going to throw $50 out there, and then maybe we settle on, say, $42. That's still pretty hefty cash, right? And during all of that negotiation, the news comes out earlier today. Alec Pierce agrees to a 4-year deal for $114 million. Looks like $80 million is guaranteed, $60 million right there the day he signs it. $60 million guaranteed the day he signs it. And I truly believe this. If Alec Pierce is the number one wide receiver in this class of free agents at wide receiver, and I think he is, and it's not a great wide receiver class. It's not. But if Alec Pierce is in a situation where he goes into it and he looks at it and he's signing with the Colts for 4-year, $114 million, and he's the number one receiver out there and he can get whatever amount he basically wants from any team, and there are teams like Washington that were willing to give him $30 to $35 million per year. In that scenario, it's in Alec Pierce's best interest to see what's out there. But Alec Pierce made it very clear that there were two things that he was looking towards for his free agency. One is a team that will target him somewhere in the area of 100 catches or 100 targets, I should say, in a season. Okay? Okay, fine. So the other is the quarterback. And he made it very clear that Daniel Jones is the guy that he was hoping would be, and he wanted assurance that Daniel Jones was going to be his quarterback. I'm not talking T.O. crying, Tony Romo, that's my quarterback level stuff. But there is no way, in my opinion, no way that Alec Pierce signs that deal or agrees to it today without assurance from either Daniel Jones or the Colts that Daniel Jones is going to be the long-term quarterback here. And when I say long-term, I mean beyond 1 year transition tag. Alec Pierce, I am prepared to say this right now, and I will gladly go out and willingly, I should say, eat crow, not literally, but do whatever to admit I'm wrong if I'm proven wrong here. But this tells me emphatically that Alec Pierce knows or has been assured that Daniel Jones is about to agree to a deal with the Colts. And all of the hypothetical and all of the monologue and all of the soliloquy and all of the Marconis that were going to come because of talking about how the injury changed things for the Colts and might have saved them and whatever else is all about to go out the window because, no question about it, Daniel Jones, we're about to find out, has some sort of an agreement right now with the Colts or is about to get one. Now, Eddie, that's not the only thing that has taken place because we also know there has been other activity. Michael Pittman Jr. is on his way to Pittsburgh. They traded for the Colts wide receiver, seemingly freeing up money for Indianapolis.
Yep.
And in doing that, they not only are getting Michael Pittman, they extended him in Pittsburgh, but there is a trade swap, right? Basically, they said to Pittsburgh, We'll trade you a couple of draft picks if you can take Michael Pittman Jr. because nothing against Michael Pittman Jr., but it puts them in a better salary cap situation, right?
Yeah. And I don't think any team was going to pay him that $25 million he's due this season, and that's why you have to kind of swallow your pride a little bit, take a late round pick swap as it has been reported. And I wonder how hard that was for Ballard, because you heard what he said at the combine. You've heard what he said over the course of Pittman's career, that he loves Michael Pittman Jr. He's one of his favorite players on the team just because the dude goes out there and, as Chappell says, he fights through everything. He plays through everything. He played through a fractured back. Think about that just 2 years ago. And he's been a great member of the locker room for the Colts during this time. But this is an unprecedented time in the Ballard era, Jake. We haven't really seen them have to dump off players to free up salary cap. We haven't seen them have to trade Zaire Franklin to alleviate some cap space, or Michael Pittman Jr. to alleviate cap space. And you have to think about this. I believe both of those guys were captains for the Colts. That's two captains that are gone.
That's right.
So they're going to have to find some new voices in the locker room of leadership.
This time of year can be interesting as well because we see fluctuation of rosters around the league, and in particular for teams that we anticipate we're going to be, like, for example, can you imagine, Eddie? Here's a good one for you. Of the teams in the AFC South, or the AFC in general, what midday radio show market would be the hardest to be doing a show right now, because you would just feel like your NFL franchise is impossible to nail down, because every time they start to make headway, something changes or pulls them back into the vat of suck. And even if it's not their own fault, each time that they start to make headway, they get pulled into that vortex of mediocrity where they've been living forever, and they have moments where it looks like it's all there for them, and then moments where it's like, oh gosh, we're back to square one.
The Cleveland Browns?
Yeah, but they just suck in general, right?
Yeah, but they had that stretch where they were starting to ascend and look like they were going to be a team that could compete in the AFC North year in and year out, and then they signed Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, that did not work out, right?
What about the Arizona Cardinals?
Okay. That's a good one. Although Arizona, again, I don't know, has there ever been like hope springing eternal in Arizona?
Like Tennessee would also be good in this category because they were competitive with Mike Vrabel, and then for whatever reason,
okay, that's good. That's not bad.
The general manager gets in the way, trades away A.J. Brown. Next thing you know, the owner and Mike Vrabel get into a tiff.
That's not bad. I'm thinking Jacksonville, because Jacksonville, you've been waiting forever for it to finally start working with Trevor Lawrence. They've gone through a series of coaches, which has been frustrating. Mm-hmm. Now they have a coach that is really good. Lawrence has seemingly found some consistency and started to show why there was so much praise about him. And they have a really good year. They could beat the playoffs. And now we find out, and I know that he maybe hasn't had the level of consistent everyday production that he showed as a younger player, but he is still an integral part and a comfort part for Lawrence. But Jacksonville loses a weapon today, right?
Yep. Travis Etienne signs with the Saints, 4 years, $52 million. So big money for New Orleans in that running back room between he and Alvin Kamara.
And that's his hometown, I think.
It is. Yeah, he's from Louisiana.
4 year, $52 million, man, for a running back.
And then Kenneth Walker got 3 years, $45 million earlier today as well. So,
how old is Etienne? Etienne's got to be. Let me look here. Let me think. Is he 29? I'm going to say he's 29.
I'm going to go with 27. Oh wow, I was on the money.
Is he 27?
January 26, 1999.
Okay. Yeah, I would have guessed, but either way, there's a lot of mileage on there. I mean, it doesn't feel like, but anyway, so that's where things stand right now. And I agree with Chap from earlier. Can we call this legal tampering? How is it legal tampering? I'm going to look up right now the definition of tampering. I'm going to guess that in the definition of tampering, the word illegal or non-scrupulous is mentioned in the actual definition.
While you do that, Jake, you have to wonder as well with the Arizona Cardinals. They released Kyler Murray. They miss out on Malik Willis. Are they now at the front of the line potentially for Anthony Richardson via trade?
You would feel that way.
Or did they go the retread route and say, hey, Kirk Cousins, you want to come start for a year?
Well, okay.
Or just run it with Jacoby Brissett?
Gardner Minshew?
Let me
ask you this.
If I'm going the backup quarterback route, I probably would stick with Brissett. No?
Yes, I was going to say, don't Kirk Cousins and Minshew feel like parallel moves to Brissett?
Kirk Cousins, I don't know. He may be just slightly above Jacoby. I don't know by how much.
Yeah, he's a little more mobile. I mean, Brissett doesn't.
I think Kirk's a better passer than Brissett.
I would agree with that. He's a better passer on the run than Brissett.
But I think you're splitting hairs when you're talking about in Arizona, whatever, the Desert Sports, whatever, midday show.
The midday out in Arizona?
Yeah.
Chris and the Coyote.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Chris and Coyote middays on the desert. I guarantee that's what it is. Right?
But it would also make sense for them to go after Richardson because it'd be the final year of that rookie deal, and it could be a 1-year gap. If he's bad, you're going to be in a position to draft a quarterback high next year again. If he's good, then you're like, hey, man, we took a shot on you. Why don't you stay around for a little bit?
To tamper. To mess with something, usually for a bad reason. That doesn't sound like an official definition. That sounds like slang. Okay. Tamper. Interfere with something in order to cause damage or make unauthorized alterations. Unauthorized. That basically says illegal, right? Unauthorized. But it's legal. So it's authorized. So it can't be tampering. Why are we calling it this? It's the open negotiation season. It's the you're allowed to talk to other people season, right? Swipe through and find out if it's a match. That's what season we're in. Have you ever met an Arizona Cardinal fan anywhere?
Cody gives a good answer to your question from earlier, Jake, and said the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. They've always got the flashy offensive player. They had Julio Jones, and now it's Bijan Robinson and Drake London. Up 28-3 in the Super Bowl, but haven't
good tight end also.
And keep going up and down.
That's good. Honestly, is Arizona, we always talk about this. When I've mentioned to you, and it's one of the things that, like, I have this weird thing with, but like obscure franchises or franchises that just seemingly not only don't have a fan base, but there's just no buzz about them whatsoever. The Arizona Cardinals are the only team in the NFL that fits that criteria, right? Because the NFL is the 800-pound gorilla. It's totally ubiquitous. And I do think over the weekend, I asked a question on the Expos Twitter that just simply said, tell me your most unpopular opinion. And one person said the NFL is oversaturated now and needs to be all games on Sunday and one on Monday. And I thought, well, I've been saying that for a while. That's old men yelling at clouds, though, right?
I wanted to reply on that and say that your love for yourself is unhealthy.
I love me some me. I think it's very healthy. I think most people would tell you that's healthy, right? There was some
Not
great...
at your level.
What's that?
Not at your level.
There was some great... When you consider how much there is to love, it's actually a very healthy level. There were some great replies on that. But in the NBA, we'd mentioned like the Washington Wizards, the Sacramento Kings, baseball, probably like the Royals. The NFL, I feel like the only one is the Cardinals. Maybe the Jaguars, but the Cardinals for certain. Do you ever see anybody wearing Cardinal gear?
On occasion.
Where?
On occasion.
Where? Maybe if you're in Vegas because it's close to Arizona.
Well, you may see the occasional Cardinal jersey around here because of Marvin Harrison Jr.
Boy, that's a stretch, though. I mean, Edgerrin played there, and I don't see anybody wearing an Edge jersey.
But that was after his Colts career.
I know. But I mean,
By the way, who says no? Just trade Anthony Richardson Sr. to Arizona for Marv Jr. Who says no, Jake?
Arizona.
That was a sarcastic question, but okay, thanks
Okay.
for playing along.
My other question with this.
Okay.
I need someone to answer a life riddle for me. I was an English major in college, okay? So the English language and vernacular and things that slang that become part of the mainstream and all of it fascinates me. Linguistics in general intrigue me. But there is one thing with the Colts quarterback situation that is a question that I'm not saying that I'm right. I think I'm probably wrong. And I don't mean it to be snarky or naive or anything. I'm legitimately, genuinely asking. There is something that has begun to take place in the city of Indianapolis in the last year that I have never, from a linguistic standpoint, observed before. And I'm curious, A, if I'm wrong, and B, if I am, if I'm the only one who's noticed it. And it has to do exactly with what you just mentioned and the quarterback position of the Indianapolis Colts. But before we get to that right now, caller number what for the Fan Fest tickets for the Final Four Fan Fest from the Indiana Sports Corps. This will be at the Convention Center, Final Four weekend, all kinds of celebration about the Final Four. There will be trophies you can see. There will be autograph sessions. There will be speakers going on. And then, obviously just the pomp and circumstance. We don't know the four schools that will be in it, but a celebration of the Final Four in general. Are we going to do this text line or phone line, Eddie?
Well, you already said caller number, so we'll stick with that. Caller 4. Also, keep in mind, Jake, Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3 Final Fours are here.
Awesome.
So it's going to be a overall really, really fun experience celebrating all three of those Final Fours in downtown Indianapolis.
Just an awesome weekend in general. Caller number, what did you say, Eddie?
Quattro.
239-1070 is the telephone number. You will be on your way. 239-1070.
You're listening to Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Now, that freaked me out. I just heard myself talking. What's going on there?
Yeah, sorry. I was trying to search for something to make a promo from today's show, Jake, and I forgot to hit pause.
By the way, hello to Jack, who works at Old National, the Murat, whichever you'd like to call it. We were at a show last night and went to get refreshments, and he said, man, I recognize your voice, which I hate my voice, so that's always, it's flattering, but appreciated, but good dude. We saw the show last night, the Simon and Garfunkel story, which was cool, at Old National Murat. Okay, did we get the tickets away for the Fan Fest, Eddie?
What'd you say? I'm sorry, I was listening again to you talk for this promo.
Did we give away the tickets for the Fan Fest?
We did. We did indeed. Yes.
And that was to?
Daniel Cornett.
Okay.
No relation to Joel.
Fair enough. Or Jordan.
Yeah.
Right. Here is my linguistic question. Before we get into why Daniel Jones and his $50 million, which sounds crazy, is not as crazy as you think.
Latest signing, Jake, in NFL legal tampering period. Mike Evans is leaving Tampa Bay after 12 years to go to the San Francisco 49ers.
Okay. Someone tell me this. I don't know.
3-year deal.
But I'm curious of this. Anthony Richardson is now Anthony Richardson Sr. because he has a son that is named Anthony Richardson Jr. I get that. But if you have a son, for example, I'll go to auto racing. Al Unser is one of only 2 men to have his name appear on the Borg-Warner Trophy in 2 different variations. Juan Montoya was Juan Montoya when he won the race in 2000. And then when he came back and won it again, by then he had been to Formula One, so it was changed on the Borg-Warner for his second win, and it says Juan Pablo Montoya. Now, Al Unser won the race in 1970, 1971, and 1978. And in all 3 of those races on the Borg-Warner Trophy, it says Al Unser. When he won it in 1987 on the Borg-Warner Trophy, it says Al Unser Sr. He did not become Al Unser Sr. after 1978. It's just that in 1987, Al Unser Sr. was used to variate because Al Unser Jr. was also racing. Typically, when one has a child that is named after them and is a junior, do they immediately take the senior when the child is an infant? Or just in situations or once the younger version becomes of adult age, and thus the variation or the distinguishing between which of the 2 you are referencing? In other words, do we need to say that Anthony Richardson Sr. is the quarterback of the Colts just to differentiate and so that people aren't confused that, like, the 10-month-old might actually be the quarterback?
I think it's more of a sign of respect, Jake, by calling him what he desires to be called by.
I'm not, again, if that's the case, then Mark Boyle should call everybody on the broadcast by what they deserve to be called or what they want to be called, not what their name is. My point simply being, I don't know. I'm not saying that he's wrong in doing it. I'm simply asking the question of, do most people, I don't know this, do most people that have a child that goes by junior immediately take on the senior, or is it once they are in situations where there could potentially be confusion of the 2? You see what I'm saying? I don't know the answer to that because I do recall, like when I was a kid, though, I don't remember hearing many kids that I grew up with that went by junior. And if that was the case, if their dad was immediately known in public circle, like there have to be other players in the NFL who have a child named after them that are juniors, right? But yet you don't typically hear the senior label with it. And I don't know, I'm not disagreeing with it, but did Anthony Richardson himself at some point request to be called senior? Or did people just start calling him that once they knew that he had a child named Anthony Richardson Jr.? These are the things that keep me awake at night. Right? Now, in terms of the number that is being requested by Daniel Jones, that sounds absurd. But listen to these numbers, Eddie, okay? I'm going to give you a quarterback, and I want you to tell me, in your mind, whether you consider Daniel Jones to be like higher or lower in value than said quarterback when he's at his best, okay?
Okay.
Deshaun Watson.
Better.
Jalen Hurts.
Not better.
Kirk Cousins.
Better.
Patrick Mahomes.
Okay.
Matthew Stafford.
Not better.
Brock Purdy.
Not better.
Tua.
Better.
Trevor Lawrence.
Not better.
Jordan Love.
Not better.
Dak Prescott.
Not better.
Dak Prescott, $60 million.
Oh, yeah. He's the largest cap hit, right?
Trevor, $55 million.
Whew.
Tua, $53.1 million.
Uh-huh.
Jalen Hurts, $51 million. Okay, Kyler Murray, $46.1 million.
Ooh, man. That is splitting hairs.
Cousins, $45 million. Mahomes, $45 million. Stafford, $40 million. When you look at those things,
I would have to also see, Jake, when a lot of those deals were agreed upon. Like, I know Kyler was, 2 years ago? Same for Kirk Cousins?
yeah, I mean, I get that. It's you know what I mean?
And the NFL has gotten to a point now where if you draft a quarterback and he has so much success, there's such a big fear of not being able to replace that quarterback that they get stuck having to pay these guys, and then they just get put in purgatory. And so that's why you see, Arizona having to move on for Kyler, Miami having to move on from Tua.
I mean,
Cleveland with Deshaun Watson, for example, another one.
I've always wondered this, what percent of big-time contracts, I mean, I don't know I'm asking this somewhat rhetorically. It would be a fascinating thing to analyze and study. The percentage of big-time free agent or extension contracts that see through to the life of it. Because doesn't it feel this way, Eddie? Like every time that a player is signed to a big-time deal, then it becomes a matter of whether or not that's a deal that we see the lifetime of it or a deal that you're desperately trying to get out from underneath in 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I know. And if you're looking at any of the deals today, I don't know if we've seen one quite yet. Maybe the Mike Evans and San Francisco dealio, just because he has had trouble staying healthy, especially as he's gotten older.
Do you think the Alec Pierce contract, in the end, we will look at it and say they got really good return on investment?
I think they will, because I think we are starting to enter the best years of Alec Pierce's career going forward.
Agreed.
There were times last year where he kind of displayed that he can not only just win vertically down the field, that he can win over the middle of the field. You're like, oh, that's nice. Really good development there. And that last year for him, he had, 84 targets, and he eclipsed over 1,000 yards. And it was, I forget the exact number of receptions, but it was the first receiver since Deshaun Jackson to have 1,000 yards in less than, 60 catches or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think he's a great player, and he is absolutely a drive extender. You know what I mean? 3rd and 18, and it's like, man, he finds a way to get himself open, and you can get it to him. But my point being, just between who's going to be throwing him the ball, if they go, like I said, do you believe that the Colts right now are better than they were three months ago?
No.
Because of which departure or which deviation?
I don't think it's about any of the departures. I think it's just more or less the quarterback spot.
Well, okay, fair. If Daniel Jones is in the mix, assuming they're able to re-sign him, and I think I am firmly believing that Daniel Jones, within a day and a half, we're going to hear that he's back. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I mean, even still, you have questions about him. I mean, he was great for 8 weeks.
I agree with that, man.
In his career, he hasn't been able to stay on the field.
Did the injury slam the door on a slight regression that we started to see?
I don't know how much of the regression either was on the fibula. Like, that's the other thing, too. If he plays all 17 games and he played like he did after he fractured the fibula, it's going to be like, well, look what he did in those first 7 games when he was healthy. Like, that is the guy that we think he is moving forward, and you still end up paying him more. You may have to pay him more money if he plays all 17 games, no matter how the season finishes, because you have the utmost confidence and belief that after a healthy offseason, getting back to where he was at training camp, having a whole offseason to train with, the players, that he's going to be able to get back to that first 8 weeks.
I do think, Eddie, that the fibula was in the Atlanta game. I believe that as much the injury and the fibula, we had just started to see the crack of the door of the light coming through with the way Pittsburgh was so aggressive against Daniel Jones, it rattled him. For the first time, he was rattled. And that seemed to open a blueprint that then led and grew itself into the leg injury and then probably the Achilles off of the leg injury. But I just think that there was, for a long time, the first half of the year, for whatever reason, and I think it's because teams were giving concerted effort on Jonathan Taylor and as well trying to figure out Tyler Warren, they were flexible to the point of allowing Daniel Jones to do some things that it's like, oh, wow. And then once everybody kind of figured out the blueprint on, okay, what they like to do, how they like to do it, the different formations they use, and they got a glimpse, then they got super aggressive against him. And I do think that he started to show that, I'm not saying it was a guaranteed, but that there was the risk that the Daniel Jones of New York was going to present itself again.
I mean, there's going to be peaks and valleys within any season, and you have to put it in perspective that the offense was operating at a historic level through the first 7-8 weeks of the year. You knew that some sort of regression toward the mean was going to happen. The part where that regression came was all the turnovers. And if you just clean up a couple of those turnovers, then the offense is still going to operate at that level it was before. And the ability of Jones to move around and manipulate the pocket is what keeps those guys on the edge honest. And when you take that away, it's going to be harder for the Colts to run the ball because you don't have to worry about the legs of Daniel Jones and getting out on the edge. So you can just collapse if you're the edge, or you can start loading up the box because you know that he's not going to be able to move. You can bring the pressure more, and you got to rely on guys to get open and with whatever they want to do in the passing scheme. And then it kind of forces Daniel Jones' hand to either panic in the pocket, get happy feet to get the ball out quick.
Feet, I'm telling you.
And make an errant throw, or just check it down or take the sack.
Hey, Jake. Couple of texts real quick to get to before we do the crossover with J&V coming up and talk about all of this happening today. Jake, is Dan Weldon's son still involved in racing? He has 2 of them, Sebastian and Oliver, and yes, they are involved under the Andretti Global umbrella, and I believe Sebastian is running a Formula Series in Europe for Prema, I think, but both of them are underneath the umbrella of Andretti Global. So, yes, they are both still involved in racing. Also, Charlie's asked me this a couple times. Is there such thing as flopping in racing? In other words, would a teammate ever cause some sort of a problem to assist another? Obviously, when you're talking about at a high rate of speed, that is something that is pretty risky. But yes, the short answer is yes. It is very rare. It is always speculated about. It is never obviously officially announced unless you're talking about when Michael Schumacher intentionally pulled over and allowed Rubens Barrichello to win the U.S. Grand Prix in Indianapolis at IMS. But unless there is, it happens more probably in Formula One or where there are team-oriented incentives. and, the old team rules, quote unquote. But are there gentlemanly things where a teammate will allow one to get past? Perhaps. But in terms of causing an incident, there has always been speculation during Tony Kanaan's Indy 500 win that on the last lap of that race that Dario Franchitti brushed the wall to bring out the caution in favor of Kanaan. I think that's absolute hogwash. I know Dario really well. There's Dario Franchitti, who had the record for most DNFs at Indianapolis. I don't think he would have compromised that just for that sake. But that was always speculated. Also, Marco Andretti's first win in the IndyCar Series, his teammate Brian Herta spun at, I think we were, at that time, that was at Infineon Raceway, Sonoma. And there was always speculation of that. So are there speculations of it? Yes. Are there sometimes eye-raising things that happen? Yes. But when you're talking about at that rate of speed and the safety element of it, it's really hard to say that someone would do it intentionally because there's just too much on the line. JMV's here. We will do the crossover brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air. Love-HVAC.com is the website. 317-353-2141 for the very best and an official Heil Heating and Cooling dealer, and we'll do it with John next.
They get it down left side, Wilburn. Outside they go, and they got the jumper up and good by Weidman. He's the key right now.
He's the key man. He can shoot the 15, 16-foot shot. He can also post up. Tech started man-to-man, and Lake Central's man-to-man.
And the guy to look for Tech is that man right there, Trey Lyles. Lyles, of course, headed to the University of Kentucky. He was the state's Gatorade Player of the Year, three-time City Player of the Year. Right now, Dave Miloshik's in a bit of a hustle as they get inside, and Lyles slams one home. Dropped off, and a slam.
Those are two Division I dunks right there for Weidman and Lyles. That's big-time dunks.
That, of course, was the 2014 4A State Championship. You heard Jerry Baker on the call. Indianapolis Tech over Lake Central 63-59. Trey Lyles, Mr. Basketball from Indianapolis Arsenal technically speaking. And Tyler Weidman, of course, of Lake Central. Weidman would go on for 19 points and 12 rebounds in that game. Lyles finished with 16 and 12, then went on to Kentucky. He was part of that platoon system that John Calipari had before becoming the 12th overall selection of the Utah Jazz in the 2015 NBA draft. Played for the Jazz, Nuggets, Spurs, Pistons in the NBA. Played last year with Sacramento. Weidman would go on to Butler, winning at least one NCAA tournament game in each of his 4 years, including reaching the Sweet 16 in 2017, now playing professionally in Europe. And that is the beauty of the high school basketball tournament. Big upset, by the way. Carmel's fabulous, but to knock off Fischer's, who had been undefeated, and a big star from Bloomfield making the rounds in terms of social media. That's what you get with the IHSAA basketball tournament. The sectional round of this year's tournament is wrapped up now, and regionals are next. Game schedule and locations, ticket information, all of it available at IHSAA.org, where you are supporting young athletes, schools, and communities. Again, all the information, IHSAA.org.
Query and Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
What an absolutely gorgeous day outside, by the way. I'm curious if anybody else went to last night, and I think it was just a one-night deal, the Simon and Garfunkel story, which was truly remarkable because the two guys that were playing, Art Garfunkel and Paul Simon, especially the guy that portrayed Paul Simon, I mean, it was amazing how much he sounded like Paul Simon. But if I was to give a critique, and I'm curious if anybody else went to it, if they noticed this, it was really well done. If you are a fan or enthusiast of Simon and Garfunkel, you would absolutely love it. And I enjoyed it for certain. But I feel like it was less about like the story and learning about Simon and Garfunkel and some sort of a stage presentation of learning their story. It didn't really it just kind of was like, okay, then their next album was this one, and here's how it came about, and here's some songs from it. It was basically a tribute band. I mean, I'm curious if anybody else, they were fabulous. They sounded dead on, but it was just kind of more that than it was like a quote-unquote, story of their life. J&B has arrived. Crossover brought to you by the good guys at Love Heating and Air. John, your thought on when you think it will be. Will it be on my show tomorrow or your show today or tomorrow when we learn that Daniel Jones has a deal?
Probably when I'm done, somewhere in between, right? I would imagine. They had no choice. People were telling me earlier today, I can't believe they paid that much for Alec Pierce. That's overpaying. Well, no duh. That's going back a ways. Then, they set the stage for this. You had to do this. If you didn't get rid of the regime running this, if you made that deal at the NFL trade deadline, you're selling us all on what was the first 10 weeks of the season. You had zero choice in the matter than to do this.
Well, my question is this. I'll ask you the same thing that I asked Eddie. Now that Michael Pittman Jr. is on his way to Pittsburgh, Zaire Franklin's been traded for basically run defense, and assuming Jones now is in the mix, and I think by signing Pierce, that leads you to believe that he's been told, look, Daniel Jones is the guy.
Right.
Are they better than they were 3 months ago?
3 months ago was when they're healthy, I would guess you would be. But the problem I think you're also going to have was that also a product of a softer schedule at the beginning that I would assume would be much tougher coming up next year as well. And you've got teams within the AFC South, again, your own division, that are still in front of you. So I don't know if I can answer that right now because I don't know what it looks like. There's a lot of people suggesting that the defense will get better. I can't tell you that. The only thing that I know, and I know this to be true because there's evidence, Jake, of it, is that it's never worked out. No matter what you thought. If you're going with the positive, it never has worked out around here. So until further notice, I guess we're all led to believe that it's probably not going to work out just by virtue of who is leading.
By the way, and pardon my total ignorance for asking this, but I believe it's your neck of the woods. Bloomfield's down near you, right?
Yeah, I saw that the Abner kid, right?
Teen Wolf kid, right?
Yeah, the Teen Wolf. I did not see. I don't know his family or anything, but one of my friends from high school, JB Neal, his son Blake is one of the better players in the state of Indiana. Is also on that team.
And they won the sectional 37. I think
they did, and that was Joey Hart, who used to be the head coach at Linton, who's the head coach at Cloverdale, and he's got a like a 6'10" center, and he's a good coach. He's had some stuff happen with him, but he's a good coach and played at Coastal Carolina back in the day.
So for those that are unfamiliar, there was I think Barstool or one of them put it out, but there was essentially a viral video now from our friend. I think WTHI might have been the one that initially had it, but
I think Similar had it too, right, at THO.
Yes. Yeah. And so, a big kid from Bloomfield that because he's a big, I'm not going to say overweight kid, but he doesn't look like a basketball player per se, but man, he can flat out shoot, right?
Yeah.
And he was knocking down shots all over the place.
I thought that was a reference to Chubbs and Teen Wolf, right?
I mean, that's because he kind of looks like him.
The only thing he didn't do was like pull out a hook shot from the top of the key. But I will give credit.
Or get the last Bobka in Seinfeld.
I'll give the kid credit. It was clear that I guess the game plan was to leave his ass wide open because they left him wide open and he knocked it down. Yeah.
He hit, like 3 or 4 of them? And it was just the way that afterwards, the interview afterwards was great. That's what people loved. Is just, I got to do what's best for my team. It's a likable kid, right?
Yeah, it was funny. One of the best scenes of Teen Wolf is at the dance, the high school dance, and Chubbs is there. Or how about the party when they did all the stuff, all the little things they did?
Is Teen Wolf, let me ask you this, is Teen Wolf basically the Saved by the Bell of movies because it's so bad it's awesome?
Yeah, there's no question about it.
You know what I mean?
It is one of the best basketball movies out there, and the basketball is literally awful in it.
I know. It's only rivaled by A Season on the Brink. Do you remember when when ESPN promoted A Season on the Brink for like 9.5 straight years?
Yeah.
And then it was literally the worst basketball you've ever seen in your life?
I had Mick on this show years ago from Teen Wolf. He was the antagonist character, Mick, and he told me, he said, I've never picked up a basketball in my life. And I said, well, we kind of understood that was the case.
That was pretty,
I think
you didn't have to tell us that, right?
I know.
There was no acting involved there. What's on the big show, John?
We got Arbuckle, we got Holder, and more on free agency and the Colts stuff and rest of the NFL. And, man, college basketball, what a turd in the punch bowl the state of Indiana has been with college basketball, man.
You're not kidding.
Come
this
on
weekend
now.
In particular.
Yeah, bad news.
All right, John's up next. We'll be back with you at noon tomorrow, and I thank you for listening to Query & Company.